What if I told you that sometimes the person you sacrifice everything for turns out to be your biggest enemy? And what if you got a second chance to rewrite your entire story? Well, buckle up because today I'm about to tell you the most jaw-dropping tale of betrayal, revenge, and ultimate justice that'll make you question everything you think you know about loyalty and love. Picture this. You're standing outside what you think is your golden wedding anniversary celebration. You've scrubbed off the dirt from another day of collecting recyclables, put on your best dress, and you're practically glowing with excitement. Your husband booked an entire fancy restaurant, and you think he's finally going to show you the appreciation you deserve after 50 years of sacrifice. But when you walk through those doors, your heart stops cold. There's a banner hanging at the entrance, and it reads celebrating 50 years of love, David and Sarah. Not David and Emily. David and Sarah. Your husband is standing there with his arm wrapped around another woman, his first love, while your own son looks at you with disgust and says, "Dad, why can't you just divorce Mom already? She's a trash collector, and the stench makes me sick." That's exactly what happened to Emily Carter, and what she did next will blow your mind. But first, let me take you back to where this incredible story really begins. Emily wasn't born into wealth or privilege. She was an abandoned child, raised by foster parents who lived right next to a landfill. Their entire survival depended on scavenging through garbage, finding recyclable materials they could sell for a few bucks. It was a hard life, but Emily learned early that honest work, no matter how humble, was something to be proud of. When Emily was 18, both her foster parents died from illness, leaving her completely alone in the world. That's when fate intervened in the most unexpected way. While searching through a trash heap one day, she found someone who would change her life forever, though not in the way she hoped. David was barely alive when she discovered him. He'd been beaten so badly he could hardly breathe. His story was tragic. His mother had been the mistress of a wealthy businessman who kept them secret for years. When David turned 15, the businessman's legitimate wife found out about the affair and the illegitimate son. Being from a powerful family, she sent thugs to nearly beat David and his mother to death. When David ran to his father for help, the man turned his back on them completely. David's mother died shortly after, and the wife's family dumped him in the landfill like trash. Emily looked at this broken boy and saw herself, another abandoned soul with nowhere to go. So she made a decision that would define the next 30 years of her life. She took him in. Now imagine being 18 years old, barely surviving yourself, and suddenly you're responsible for someone else. Emily didn't just give David a place to sleep. She worked herself to the bone to pay for his medical treatment, his education, his clothes, his food, everything. We're talking about a girl who would wake up at 3 in the morning to deliver milk, spend her days collecting scrap metal, and run a food stall at night markets just to scrape together enough money for David's school fees. First, David was grateful. He would hug Emily tight and promise that once he made something of himself, he'd never let her struggle again. He painted beautiful pictures of their future together, how he'd buy her expensive clothes and shoes, how he'd take care of her the way she was taking care of him. But here's where the story takes a dark turn. As David got older and started attending better schools, something changed. He became ashamed of Emily, ashamed of where they lived, ashamed of how she smelled after long days of collecting garbage, ashamed of everything she represented. The breaking point came when Emily gave David a backpack she'd found in the trash. It was in perfect condition, barely used, but David exploded with rage. He screamed at her about how humiliating it was when his classmates recognized it as something they'd thrown away. He threw the backpack at her so hard it left bruises on her ribs. But Emily, being the devoted person she was, took every penny she'd saved for David's crucial brain surgery and spent it on a brand new designer backpack instead. $3,000. Money that was supposed to save his eyesight went to salvage his pride. To make up for that money, Emily did something that should have been unthinkable. She went to underground clinics and sold her blood multiple times. Can you imagine the desperation? The physical pain of those needles, the weakness afterward. Also, the boy she loved could have a fancy backpack and avoid embarrassment at school. And how did David repay this sacrifice? He blamed her for meddling in his life. He was angry that the surgery timing interfered with his first love's birthday party. Sarah Whitman, the girl who would eventually destroy everything Emily had built. Years passed. Emily continued sacrificing everything for David's education. She put him through university, funded his graduate studies, even supported him when he studied abroad for 2 years. The final tally? Over $2 million of her hard-earned money, all invested in David's future. David became exactly what he'd dreamed of, a respected university professor. And Emily? She had to beg him for $2,000 a month just to buy groceries. The woman who had sacrificed her youth, her health, and her entire life for his success was now treated like a burden. Then came their golden wedding anniversary. David had planned what Emily thought was a romantic celebration, but it turned out to be the cruelest joke imaginable. He was celebrating 50 years of love, but not with Emily. With Sarah, his first love, who had come back into his life. Emily went home that night and made a decision that would change everything. She turned on the gas valve, and with a loud explosion it all ended. But here's where this story becomes absolutely incredible. When Emily opened her eyes again, she was 18 years old, back in the tiny shack by the landfill, and David was standing there screaming at her about another piece of trash she'd given him. She had been reborn, given a second chance at life, but this time she had all the knowledge and memories of what David would become. She knew exactly how her kindness would be repaid, how her sacrifices would be dismissed, and how her love would be discarded. So Emily made a different choice. When David threw that backpack at her and demanded she never give him garbage again, Emily didn't cry. She didn't apologize. Instead, she looked him straight in the eye and said something that shocked him to his core. "This is my house. I took you in out of kindness, and you think this place belongs to you? If you don't want to stay, then get out." David couldn't believe what he was hearing. For 3 years, Emily had been like a devoted puppy, doing everything to please him. Now she was telling him to leave? But Emily wasn't done. She pulled out a notebook and started reading every single expense she'd covered for David over the past 3 years. Medical treatment, school transfers, tuition, textbooks, meals, clothes, shoes, class trips, New Year gatherings, monthly allowances. The total came to over $26,000. "David," she said calmly, "over the past 3 years, I've spent $26,800 on you. For the sake of everything we've been through, I'll give you a discount. Just pay me back $26,000 and we'll call it even." David's face went white. He grabbed the notebook and tore it to pieces, laughing mockingly. "So what? It's not like I forced you to spend that money on me. You chose to do it. Did I ever ask you to? Did I beg you to support me?" That's when Emily truly saw David for who he really was. Not someone who had turned bad over time, but someone who had been rotten from the very beginning. She slapped him across the face with every ounce of strength she had and threw him out of the house. Now you might think that's where the story ends, but oh no, it's just getting started. Without Emily's support, David's life began to crumble in ways he never expected. In their previous life, Emily had been there to cushion every blow, to solve every problem, to fund every dream. But in this new timeline, David was on his own, and he had no idea how to survive without his devoted supporter. Meanwhile, Emily began to flourish. Without the constant drain of David's expenses, she could actually save money. She ate the perfectly good food that stores threw away instead of buying expensive fresh groceries for David's refined palate. She focused on building her recycling business instead of working 3 jobs just to pay for someone else's education. But David wasn't ready to give up his meal ticket that easily. He came back, confident that Emily would cave like she always had. He even offered to marry her if she would pay for his PhD education. Can you believe the audacity? That's when Emily realized something that sent chills down her spine. David had been reborn too. He mentioned specific details about becoming the city's top science student, details that hadn't happened yet. He remembered their previous life and was trying to manipulate her all over again. But this time Emily was ready for him. "So you're going to marry me?" she asked with a smirk. "Then what about Sarah Whitman?" David's expression changed instantly. He knew she had the same memories he did. "That's right," Emily continued. "So drop the manipulation tactics, David. In our last life, you sucked the life out of me, going from a rejected bastard to a renowned professor. And how did you treat me after that? If there's even a tiny bit of decency left in you, please don't ruin my life again." David left that day, but Emily knew he'd be back. People like David don't change, they just find new ways to use people. Emily threw herself into building her business with the knowledge and experience from her previous life. She knew exactly when the recycling industry would boom, which areas of the city would be redeveloped, where to invest her money for maximum returns. The same knowledge that David was trying to use to recreate his academic success, Emily was using to build an empire. One day, while conducting business in the city, Emily spotted David and Sarah coming out of a cheap motel, both looking disheveled and flushed. When David saw Emily, he tried to show off, pulling Sarah closer as if to prove he'd made the right choice. But Emily just turned and walked away. She had no interest in David's pathetic displays anymore. That evening, David showed up at Emily's recycling center, standing outside and shouting through the door about how Sarah was his woman now, how they were getting married after graduation, how Emily should forget about him and move on. The sheer arrogance was breathtaking. This was a man who had spent his previous life living off Emily's sacrifices, and now he was acting like she was the one who couldn't let go. Emily's response was perfect. She poured a full basin of dirty mop water over the wall, drenching David from head to toe with greasy vegetable scraps, chicken bones, and fish spines clinging to his hair and face. "At least I earn my living honestly," she called down to him. "Not like some people who spend 2 lifetimes living off women like parasites." But the universe had its own plans for David and Sarah. Sarah's wealthy parents had never approved of their daughter dating an illegitimate son with no prospects. When David tried to interfere in their relationship, Sarah's family decided to teach him a lesson he'd never forget. They cornered David outside his school and beat him savagely. During the attack, someone struck his arm with a metal rod, breaking it completely. With less than a month until the college entrance exams and his writing hand shattered, David's dreams of becoming the top student in the city were over. Sarah, terrified of her parents and wanting to avoid scandal, convinced David to drop the charges. In return, she agreed to get engaged to him, though both of them knew it was just for show. The engagement was a disaster. David couldn't afford a proper venue, so he booked a roadside food stall. Sarah's relatives attended with sour faces, clearly embarrassed by the whole affair. When it came time for family speeches, David had to pay a homeless man to pretend to be his grandfather, because his real family had abandoned him. The fake grandfather was filthy and drunk. He got David's name wrong during his speech while waving around a greasy chicken leg. Sarah's family burst into laughter, and Sarah cried from humiliation. The very next day after receiving her college acceptance letter, Sarah left town without looking back. David wanted to chase after her, but with his broken arm, he'd missed the college entrance exam and had to repeat his senior year. Without Emily's financial support, David quickly learned what real poverty felt like. He couldn't afford textbooks or even basic meals. Still delusional about his prospects, he went to Sarah's parents asking them to fund his education. Sarah's family had been looking for a way out of the engagement, and they came up with a cruel but effective plan. They invited David for dinner, got him completely drunk, and arranged for him to wake up in bed with a mentally disabled woman from their extended family. When the woman's parents found out, they demanded David take responsibility or face charges for assaulting a vulnerable person. The school, fearing scandal, expelled David immediately. Beaten and desperate to avoid jail, David had no choice but to marry the woman. Her family, afraid David might run away, refused to let him return to school. They dragged him to the countryside to work in the fields. When David refused to consummate the marriage, they drugged him with livestock breeding medication. The woman became pregnant, and David's fate was sealed. But the family complained that David was useless and couldn't make money, so they sent him to work in an illegal coal mine. David, who had never done physical labor in either lifetime, lasted less than a month before there was an accident. His leg was caught in machinery and had to be amputated. 2 years later, Emily encountered David again. But the meeting was nothing like their previous confrontations. Emily had seized the opportunities in the booming recycling industry and built an empire of over 20 collection stations across the region. She'd won the contract for the city's largest scrap metal operation and employed dozens of workers. David, meanwhile, had become everything he'd once looked down upon. He was disabled, homeless, and digging through trash to survive. The brain surgery that Emily had funded in their previous life never happened this time, and the untreated blood clot had cost him the sight in one eye. After his mining accident, The woman's family had taken his compensation money and kicked him out. With one leg amputated and one eye blind, David couldn't even bring himself to beg. So he dragged his broken body to the landfill, competing with elderly scavengers for scraps. When he saw Emily inspecting her operations, David dropped his bag of recyclables and crawled toward her on his knees, crying and begging for another chance. "Emily, I was wrong," he sobbed. "Sarah was the kind of woman who could enjoy good times but not suffer through bad ones. Only you truly loved me. Let's start over. I still remember all my research from when I was a professor. If you help me get back into school, support me while I study again, once I become a professor, I'll treat you right this time." Before Emily could respond, she felt strong arms wrap around her. Her husband, Ethan, looked down at David with disgust. "Do you even know who she is?" Ethan asked. "You're a filthy beggar, and you have the nerve to say you want to marry my wife? Do you know who Emily Carter is? She's the most successful entrepreneur in the province, a startup pioneer, a women's honor flag bearer, and Secretary General of the Women's Entrepreneur Association. Look at yourself in a mirror. You really think you deserve her?" Emily leaned into Ethan's embrace and looked down at David calmly. "David, there's no such thing as a second chance in life. You're the one who said I was just a trash picker, and only someone like Sarah deserved to be by your side. Fine, I've accepted that. Go chase after your precious Sarah." At the mention of Sarah's name, David's expression twisted with rage and pain. "Don't say her name," he spat. "I treated her so well in my last life, gave her everything I had. And what did she do? The moment she found out I was disabled, she stopped taking my calls. She didn't even come to see me." Emily had her assistant buy David a plane ticket to go find his beloved Sarah, who had moved abroad. What David discovered there would be his final lesson in the true nature of the woman he'd chosen over Emily. Sarah had seduced her professor shortly after studying abroad, hoping to get permanent residency. She'd married a man 30 years her senior, and was living a comfortable life that had nothing to do with love. When David confronted her, something inside him finally snapped. During their dinner, as they were leaving the restaurant, David lunged forward and plunged a steak knife into Sarah's artery. She died instantly. David was holding the weapon when police arrived. Knowing that law enforcement in that country often shot suspects during arrests, David had planned this as his final act. He thought that if he died, maybe he'd get another chance at rebirth, another opportunity to stay away from Sarah and love only Emily. But there was no third chance. David was shot and killed during his arrest. A month later, Emily received David's final letter, written before his desperate act. He'd explained his plan, his hope for another rebirth, his promise to do better next time. But the universe had given him all the chances he was going to get. Meanwhile, Emily was living her best life. She and Ethan celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary in full elegance, surrounded by friends and family who truly valued and respected her. She'd built a business empire from nothing, earned recognition as a pioneering entrepreneur, and found a partner who saw her worth from the very beginning. The woman who had once been dismissed as a trash picker was now one of the most successful businesspeople in the province. The man who had once looked down on her honest work had died as a disabled beggar, fighting for scraps in the same landfill where Emily had once saved his life. But here's the most powerful part of this entire story. Emily's transformation wasn't just about getting revenge on David. It was about recognizing her own worth and refusing to accept less than she deserved. In her first life, Emily had been so focused on proving her love through sacrifice that she'd lost herself completely. She'd measured her value by how much she could give to someone else, how much pain she could endure, how much of herself she could sacrifice for another person's dreams. In her second life, Emily learned that real love doesn't require you to destroy yourself for someone else's benefit. Real love is reciprocal, respectful, and built on mutual support, not one-sided sacrifice. David never truly loved Emily. He loved what she could do for him, how she could serve his ambitions, how she could fund his dreams. When she stopped being useful, he discarded her without a second thought. That's not love, that's exploitation. Emily's story teaches us some profound lessons about self-worth, relationships, and the difference between genuine love and manipulation. First, never sacrifice so much of yourself for someone else that you lose your own identity and dreams. A person who truly loves you will never ask you to destroy yourself for their benefit. Second, pay attention to how people treat you when you're no longer useful to them. David's true character emerged the moment Emily stopped funding his lifestyle. His gratitude was conditional. His affection was transactional. Third, sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and refusing to engage with people who've mistreated you. Emily didn't need to actively destroy David's life in her second chance. She just stopped enabling his destructive behavior and focused on building her own success. Fourth, never underestimate the power of honest work and determination. Emily built an empire from recycling, something David had always looked down upon. Her success came from recognizing opportunities, working hard, and treating people with respect. Finally, and most importantly, you teach people how to treat you by what you accept. In her first life, Emily accepted disrespect, ingratitude, and emotional abuse because she thought that's what love looked like. In her second life, she demanded better and found a partner who genuinely valued her. The contrast between Emily's two lives is staggering. In her first life, she died alone and unappreciated, having given everything to people who saw her as disposable. In her second life, she built meaningful relationships, achieved professional success, and found happiness with someone who truly cherished her. David's story serves as a cautionary tale about entitlement, ingratitude, and the consequences of treating people poorly. He had every opportunity to build a genuine, loving relationship with Emily, but he chose to exploit her kindness instead. When karma finally caught up with him, he had no one to blame but himself. The most satisfying part of this story isn't David's downfall, it's Emily's rise. She transformed from a woman who begged for scraps of affection to a confident, successful entrepreneur who commanded respect wherever she went. She went from someone who was ashamed of her honest work to someone who built an empire from that same work. Emily's journey reminds us that our circumstances don't define us, our choices do. She could have chosen bitterness and revenge in her second life, but instead she chose growth and success. She could have wasted time trying to change David, but instead she invested in changing herself. The recycling business that David had mocked became the foundation of Emily's fortune. The trash picking he'd been ashamed of became the skill set that made her a millionaire. The woman he dismissed as unworthy became the kind of success story that others aspire to emulate. And that's the ultimate lesson of Emily's incredible journey. Your worth isn't determined by how others treat you. It's determined by how you treat yourself and what you're willing to accept in your life. Emily's story is proof that it's never too late to change your life, set better boundaries, and demand the respect you deserve. Whether you get a literal second chance like Emily did, or you have to create your own fresh start in this life, the principles remain the same. Stop accepting less than you deserve. Stop sacrificing yourself for people who don't appreciate your sacrifices. Stop measuring your worth by how much pain you can endure for someone else's benefit. Instead, invest in yourself. Build your own dreams. Surround yourself with people who celebrate your successes instead of people who take them for granted. Find partners who contribute to your happiness instead of people who drain your energy. Emily's transformation from a woman who died turning on a gas valve in despair to a successful entrepreneur celebrating her anniversary in joy is one of the most powerful redemption stories I've ever encountered. It shows us that with the right mindset and choices, we can completely rewrite our life story. So here's my challenge to you. Look at your own life and ask yourself, are you living like first life Emily or second life Emily? Are you sacrificing yourself for people who don't appreciate you? Or are you building a life that reflects your true worth? Are you accepting crumbs of affection from people who see you as convenient? Or are you demanding the full meal of respect and genuine love that you deserve? The beautiful thing about Emily's story is that while most of us won't get a literal rebirth, we can all have a psychological rebirth. We can all wake up tomorrow and decide to stop accepting less than we deserve. We can all choose to invest in ourselves instead of pouring everything into people who will never appreciate our sacrifices. Emily's journey from trash picker to business mogul isn't just a story about revenge or karma. It's a story about recognizing your own value and refusing to accept anything less than what you're worth. And that, my friends, is a lesson worth learning from, whether you believe in reincarnation or not. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about your own relationships and self-worth, then hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories that will challenge how you think about life, love, and success. And let me know in the comments, have you ever had to walk away from someone who was taking advantage of your kindness? How did you find the strength to choose yourself? Your story might inspire someone else who's struggling with the same decision Emily faced. Remember, you're not responsible for fixing broken people at the expense of breaking yourself. You're responsible for building a life that reflects your true worth and surrounding yourself with people who celebrate that worth instead of exploiting it. Emily learned that lesson the hard way, but her story can help you learn it the easy way. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll explore another incredible tale of transformation, revenge, and the power of choosing yourself.